Breakfast Special.
Welcome to your Breakfast Special. I'm Audrey Seek. Now, this is an ongoing crisis that's grabbing global headlines. Just hot off the press, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a, quote, complete and total ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran, which is reportedly due to start in just a few hours. This comes just hours also after Iran attacked and fired missiles at a U.S. airbase in Qatar as a response to Trump ordering a high-profile strike on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities. The steep escalation between Israel and Iran, now joined by the U.S., has dramatically raised the stakes and could send shockwaves far beyond the Middle East. Iran's parliament has also reportedly approved to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, a key oil artery for the world. So, is this ceasefire the start of real de-escalation or just a pause before the next round of confrontation? And what does this all mean geopolitically, economically, and for us here in Asia? We're joined by 2 guests to help unpack all of these developments. We are happy to welcome Dr. James Dorsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow at Nanyang Technological University's S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, and the author and host of the syndicated column and podcast, The Turbulent World with James M. Dorsey. James, it's great to have you with us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Good morning.
Good morning. And also joining in on the conversation is Bhavan Jaipragas, Deputy Opinion Editor at the Straits Times. Welcome to the show, Bhavan, and to the studio.
Good to be here.
Great to have you both with us. And we'll start with the latest development, the ceasefire that has just been announced on Truth Social by President Trump, saying that this should be called, quote, the 12-day war. So, James, if you can kick us off, what do you make of this? Timing-wise, tone-wise, is this a sign of serious diplomacy or more of a tactical pause for both sides to kind of regroup?
I don't think we have an idea. Essentially, we have a tweet, if you wish, on Truth Social saying that there is a ceasefire, the terms of which are not laid out in any form or fashion. I would be highly surprised if Iran would agree to a ceasefire which it first stops and Israel second. So that already raises a red flag, if you wish. Neither Iran nor Israel have confirmed this. Now, having said, and we're not clear what the terms of those ceasefire would be. Now, having said that, I'm not surprised that there is a ceasefire. The Iranians have basically all along said, we want this to end. We didn't start this, and there is no diplomatic political movement without the fighting first and ending first, meaning Israel halts its attacks. The Israelis have essentially hinted that they were close to achieving their goals. One can raise questions about whether or not they did, but nonetheless that they were close to achieving their goals, and there was some speculation that the Israelis could halt the fighting, declare victory by the end of this week or early next week. Trump is basically in a position in which he, in some ways, has painted himself into a corner when it comes to the negotiations, and took a significant risk of being dragged into another war with the attacks on the 3 nuclear facilities. So this may very well be his way out, too.
So, Bhavan, I'm going to toss it to you here. Are you surprised by this, timing-wise? Let's not forget that just hours before this, Iran sent missile strikes on the U.S. airbase in Qatar.
I'm not surprised. I'm like the professor, we don't have the details to know exactly, the terms of the ceasefire, but if one is in place or has been negotiated, there were signs that something like this would happen, right? First, when Pete Hegseth, the Pentagon chief, spoke on Sunday night, Singapore time, laying out the details of Operation Midnight Hammer, I sensed there's kind of the outline of an off-ramp, right? So he was made the point that the attack was specifically targeted at Iran's nuclear program, right? Not regime change. And then later on, Bibi Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, also made some comments to that effect on Sunday night, Israel time, saying that the IDF was very, very close to achieving what it had set out to do. So again, that regime change kind of rhetoric of the last few days had, petered out.
Yeah.
So clearly there was just discerning these comments, these public comments, and one assumes these are also made privately through whatever channels, they are diplomatic and so on, that here is an off-ramp, Iran should take it. So, and at that point, when these comments were being made, Iran had various options, right? For retaliation, it could have been something more severe. They could have perhaps taken some action at the Strait of Hormuz or something that escalates the tensions. This attack on Qatar, if you look at the reports of how it panned out, and as Trump said, they were given advance warning, planes were evacuated from that facility. So like in the case of the aftermath of the assassination of Soleimani in 2020, the retaliation is kind of symbolic. So the Americans are okay to allow, in a sense, some symbolic retaliation, and then have that off-ramp take effect.
Okay, so I want James's take on this. When it comes to the missile strikes on the U.S. airbase in Qatar, what is the significance of this strike? Is it more symbolic, or is Iran sending a serious warning here? Because to your point, President Trump has said that the U.S. was given advance notice, so no one was hurt or injured. So is this 100% symbolic to you?
I think it's both, and there's no contradiction between the two. In other words, Iran has been very calibrated, actually not only in the last 12 days, but throughout the crisis in the Middle East from the moment that Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, 2023, it's been very calibrated in its moves. It has not wanted escalation. It's made very clear that, it did not start this war over the last 12 days, and it doesn't want it to continue, but it will not surrender. And I think that what you saw with the missile strike against the Al Udeid air base in Qatar was a strike that, on the one hand, showed capability, but was designed and intended not to this be the beginning of an escalatory trajectory in which both countries, the United States and Iran, would have become embroiled in a full-scale war.
Yeah, the timeline has been moving really rapidly the last few days. And Bhavan, I want to bring you in now with, you've been writing straight shooting commentary for the Straits Times and other publications for a while now. And you recently wrote a piece titled "The Massive Gamble to Destroy Iran's Nukes." So talk us through this gamble and the overall gist of this latest piece that you wrote.
So the point I was trying to make is that inadvertently, by taking this action against Iran to take out its nuclear program, where it had been for at least 2 decades, Iran has largely stayed its hand in terms of developing its nuclear weapons program to the extent of, becoming like North Korea, right? Breaking out and coming up with a weapon and a launch system. That has not happened. But if you push it into a corner, and given the resources that they have, the knowledge that they have, still, even after the assassination of various nuclear scientists in the last week or so, and the huge stockpile of uranium that they have. So 2 things are very important here. The knowledge that they have amassed over decades, and the uranium stockpile, 408 kg of which is enriched to 60%, which is well above what is needed for civilian nuclear energy, right? So that's the part of the program that the global community is concerned about. Why are they enriching to 60%, which is just off what is needed for weapons grade? So with these 2 elements in their hands, they can break out to make a bomb. It may have been delayed by these attacks on the 3 facilities. And we have no idea that the stockpile has been destroyed. On that front, the Israelis have met their objective. So the 3 facilities have been destroyed, but the current state of the stockpile is not known, right? So the point being, they can still break out to make a bomb. And now more than ever in the last 2 decades, they may be in a state of mind that they are pressed in the corner and they need to urgently move and get the bomb. for deterrence.
So this is a very complex and fast-moving issue. James, what do you think is the strategic intent behind everything that has happened over the weekend and yesterday? What's the main goal or the end game here? Is it about containment? Is it political messaging? What signal was Trump trying to send?
Well, I think, the Iranians, the Israelis, and the Americans have different goals. Trump wants a nuclear agreement. The problem with it is that he set himself up for failure. He has a dilemma. He walked away from the 2018 agreement. For him to conclude a new agreement, he's got to be able to demonstrate that it's a better agreement. That's one reason why we're insisting on 0% enrichment, even though Iran has a right to 3.76%. His negotiated strategy has essentially been saying to Iran, this is what I want, this is what you're going to do, this is what happens if you don't do it. That's a formula that is, by definition, doomed to failure, because the Iranians, this is a regime that's been in power for 46 years. That's been what it's been told for 46 years, and it hasn't caved in. The Israelis have long been in favor of regime change. It's not something they can achieve. They've wanted total destruction of the nuclear program. It's not something they can achieve. The Iranians have long wanted a negotiation. One of the problems, and this is my final comment here, with the Iranians is that everything has happened has strengthened those voices. And with everything, I mean everything over the last 2 years. Everything that has happened has strengthened those voices in Iran that see a nuclear weapon as a deterrence. Keep in mind that Israel is an undeclared nuclear state.
All right. Also in the spotlight in the last couple of days is the Strait of Hormuz, which is a huge energy choke point. What would this supposed ceasefire mean for this part of the equation? Is the can kicked down the road? Is this crisis kind of averted for now, Bhavan?
I think Asian countries, including Singapore, will be hoping this ceasefire is in fact, firstly, indeed a ceasefire, and that it holds, so much of trade passes through that narrow strait where, Iran has significant sway. And, in the past, we have had instances where Iran surrogates, the Houthis, have caused mayhem there for global shipping. So one hopes that that is not the case here, and one hopes that Iran does not see disrupting that strait as one of its retaliatory moves in this instance. And I assume that China too shares this view. A large part of its energy imports come through that waterway. Yes.
Yeah. So China has traditionally walked a tightrope in the Middle East, as we know. Key trading partner to Iran, has growing ties with Israel as well. So James, I know this is purely speculatory, but how is Beijing likely to respond to all of this? They've been relatively quiet.
Well, essentially, the problem for the Chinese is that they have influence with the Iranians. It's a more complex relationship than is publicly portrayed, but nonetheless, don't have any influence with Israel, and they're not a player in any form or fashion in the Gulf beyond the economic aspect of relationships. They obviously have a vital interest, and they will have advised the Iranians not to close the Strait of Hormuz. They'll have advised the Iranians not to escalate this conflict. They would have given the Iranians political and diplomatic support, for example, in the United Nations Security Council. But that's, I think, as far as it would have gone.
Okay. And so for Singapore and the region, what are the immediate kind of knock-on effects that we might see? Talking about fuel prices here, inflation, flight paths. What do you think, Bhavan?
Right. Flight paths, I assume Singaporeans are watching very closely. We use the Gulf Airlines quite a fair bit to travel to Europe, for instance. So we saw Singapore Airlines flights to Dubai affected. So that's one. But on a broader scale, and this is a column that I'm working on about international institutions working, right? So in this case, the Security Council and just generally the United Nations seem to be sidelined in this entire conflict, right? Almost like not the first port of call. One expects that when there's conflict that, it is the first port of call, that countries go to the UN and then try and find a solution to avoid conflict there. But that has not been the case. When Pete Hegseth had that press conference on Sunday night, The international and American media asked various questions, very good questions, but no one asked him, why didn't you go to the Security Council? Why has none of the players, for you to take such a big step, Operation Midnight Hammer, does this require UN approval? Are we now in a state of global affairs where countries can take unilateral aggressive action?
Okay, so what role should the IAEA and the UN be playing right now then?
I think the IAEA will come out of this conflict looking, that's my view at least from what I read and observe, looking pretty good. I think they have tried as far as possible to be transparent, to be forthcoming with information that they have, and as far as possible objective. The IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, has been reporting to the Security Council the agency's findings, quite important moments, including immediately after Midnight Hammer took place. And for Mr. Gross himself, even though he would much prefer that this conflict did not happen, that he is in the spotlight, placed into his interest, he has said that he wants to be the next Secretary General. This raises his profile globally. Yes.
All right. So, James, we're going to let you have the last word here. From a global strategy kind of perspective, what are these scenarios you think we should be watching over the next week and beyond?
Well, I think we've really got to first and foremost wait to see what the terms of the ceasefire are and how the parties interpret it. You may very well see different interpretations by Iran and Israel. For example, over what Israel claims its right to at any time and at any moment intervene and confront whatever danger it envisions that are seeing. So I think it's much too early to see. Also, this ceasefire leaves most of the fundamental issues unresolved. Iran's nuclear program may have had significant setback, but we don't know where the uranium is. We don't know whether Israel or Iran will still go ahead with its proposal to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So essentially, we're left with more questions than we have answers.
So yeah, this is a very tense and fast-moving global story. We don't have much clarity on the ceasefire agreement, whether or not it will bring a moment of calm, but the underlying tensions, the regional stakes and economic risks haven't gone away, and we'll be watching this space extremely closely. Gentlemen, we really appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. James Dorsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow at NTU's S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, and Bhavan Jaipragas, Deputy Opinion Editor of the Straits Times. You're listening to Money FM 89.3. Stay with us.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.